Welcome to the Vendetta Sports Daily. Today we're here with myself, James Herrick, joined by Anthony Miranda. Anthony, hi.
I'm doing good, chilling, ready to talk some sports.
Yeah, that's great. And I buffered the second we started recording. Always great, always outstanding, but nonetheless, we're here. And so today, we're going to begin with a lot of contract talk because across the NBA and the NFL, there's been a lot of big contract news. So that's what we're going to lead off with, and we're going to end today with a little bit of UFC talk and just talk about the BMF belt and our opinions on that. But first, let's dive into the NBA first because we really only have one big NBA contract extension, and then we'll hop over to NFL. So to start, Jaylen Brown got big money from the Boston Celtics. What's your opinion on Jaylen Brown getting that supermax? I mean, the Celtics didn't really have that much of a choice, but what's your opinion on Brown getting that money?
Um, well, the contract, I mean, it's hard to say because the contract is huge and it's probably not ideal, but the talent wise and being able to retain a player like that is still, pretty young and you can win a championship with him, especially him playing number two to Jason Tatum or, yeah, number two. At times it's more 1A, 1B, but overall, number two. And I think it would have been hard to let a player like him walk necessarily. So I think although it's not the contract you want to see, um, I think it's something that had to happen. Like you said, they didn't have much of a choice, but um, I think keeping him on the team is overall a net positive.
Yeah, I think I'm right in line with you there. And I don't think that giving Jaylen Brown that type of money is ideal. You probably, it's the type of deal where you have to give him the super max and you don't really have a choice. If you don't give him that super max, he's not going to sign that contract. So I completely understand. And like you said, not ideal. That's not an ideal contract to have your second best player sign. But the new CBA does allow for you to pay that second guy, and they'll have to extend Tatum eventually as well. But you can afford paying that second guy. The question will be if Jaylen Brown is a good enough second man to lead them to a championship, and is Jason Tatum a good enough lead man to lead you to a championship? And, in my opinion, I think they have a good chance. I don't think Tatum is the quality of player as, someone like Jokic who just did it or someone like Giannis. But, you're not going to get a better player than Jason Tatum. So you have to roll with it and you have to build that team around him. Same can be said for Jaylen Brown. You're not going to get a better second option than Jaylen Brown. That is incredibly unlikely. So they're keeping the guys they drafted and they're keeping them in town. And now it's basically just about filling out that roster. They did a good job adding Kristaps Porzingis. That should help them fill out the roster, get a little bit more production from three down in terms of players. So I think this is a deal they had to make, like you said. Not ideal, but I mean that team is still in a great position to win the championship, and they will be as long as Tatum and Brown are in their prime.
Yeah, and I think too. I want to say one of their first or second years. I think Eastern Conference Finals with against LeBron and lost, and then just a couple of years ago in the finals against the Warriors. So I mean, they proved they can do it. Now I think their teams around them could have been a bit better. Um, Not that they weren't good in any way, but to win that championship when they were against the Warriors. But so I mean, they've shown they can do it. They just got to at the end of the day, not even regular season, because obviously they've been stellar in the regular season. But once you get to that, you just got to win games. You got seven of them. You just got to win four of them, and show you can actually do it. And then it'd be nice to see them both fully elevate that play. And because as soon as if they both ball out, then they're like, you know, superstars and like what a duo this is. So they just got to at the end of the day, once they get that far, make it happen.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And even when you look back at some of those series that lost, like if you look at the Golden State series, obviously Curry played outstanding, but it's like that team had a lot more depth on it. Whether it be Clay, Wiggins, Jordan Poole had one of the best. That was probably the best playoff series that Jordan Poole has had as well. So they were getting a lot of production from even guys like Looney as well. So it's like that team was getting a lot more production out of its starters, but still not the stars, but their starter level of
Hmm.
players in comparison to the Celtics. And I think there was a little bit of recency bias involved here as well, where Brown didn't have a great Eastern Conference Finals, right? No one's saying he did, but that kind of one bad series has led to a large overreaction to him as a player and whether you should pay him big money and where he's rated in the NBA. I think long term that'll work itself out. So you got him to a long term deal. Those issues will probably be less extreme, or those concerns maybe is a better way to phrase it,
Hmm.
but those will be less extreme 2 years down the line once you see him, you know, get deeper. He'll probably work on his handling a little bit, and one or two good playoff series in the Eastern Conference Finals or Finals will make this contract well worth it.
Exactly. That is true because like you never want to see was it, this was like the richest deal or like the I think of all time or up to this point, obviously with the new where the contracts work. But at the end of the day, yeah, it doesn't matter how much you pay someone. I think if you win a championship, the contract's worth it. So, and he's got some years to do it with the new one. It just depends if it happens.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think a lot of people forget, and we'll talk about this in with Herbert as well here in a minute, but the next guy is always the guy who gets the most.
Hmm.
The contract that's been done the most recently, that guy always gets. He's always the highest paid player. Next offseason, someone else will get that and now be the highest paid player. So it's kind of just the cost of doing business. Making him the highest paid player doesn't mean he has to be the best player in the league because someone else is going to get more money next offseason.
Yeah, 100% agree. Because it's funny, you always look at the say that top five, in football specifically with the quarterback position, but top five players. Um, Sometimes the highest paid player, yeah, is more a top 10 guy that they just he's up there. He's not maybe the best or in that top five, but it's just the way the contracts work in these sports is you gotta pay him. Can you hear me?
All right. All right. Yeah. So,
Okay.
once again, don't know why the Wi-Fi keeps don't know why the Wi-Fi keeps bugging out on me. So hopefully that resolves itself. But yeah. So moving off of Jalen Brown, but I'm 100% with you on that, and it's pretty self-explanatory there. Moving over to Justin Herbert, I think it's a lot of the same talk for Herbert as well, where hey, this is the cost of doing business with your star quarterback in the NFL, and it's kind of similar where Justin Herbert is not Chargers are paying him, and they can still make a playoff push with him as their man. So you got to extend him.
I think too with I'm probably more of a Herbert believer than most too, and I do really like him, and especially again with football too. I think he's the caliber of quarterback that me personally I wouldn't mind paying that. Um, I think the issue, well, I think Herbert could play better at times. That team compared to a Chiefs team or a Bengals team or that Rams team from a couple years ago, even you could say the Bucks team, like it's just the team's been lacking a little bit. While I do think not all, like I feel like even though I'm a big Herbert fan, I think he eludes some of the or not the pressure, but the like the negativity sometimes because I feel like a lot of people always blame the team, but at the same time, that team is in past years has not been near the other teams you've seen making it to the AFC Championship, NFC Championship, Super Bowl. So I think he is fully capable of winning a Super Bowl. Um, I think, to be fair though, with the teams he's had, he should have been. I think he was more capable of making it to an AFC Championship game at least up to this point. But as a Chargers, like if I were a Chargers fan, I would not really have a problem with that contract because I wouldn't mind putting my eggs in the Justin Herbert basket to eventually, hopefully, get a Super Bowl.
Yeah, and the I think Trey did a post on the NFL coaches hot seat, and number one was Brandon Staley, and one of the things he mentioned was that Brandon Staley kind of wasted Justin Herbert's rookie deal, and that Brandon Staley has not been a great head coach for the Chargers, and that's me saying that there. He's not been a great head coach for the Chargers, and that's also played into their lack of success as well. So for Herbert, it's like he has not been, as good as someone like Mahomes or Allen. We haven't seen the peak as high yet, but once again, you're not going to find a better quarterback than Justin Herbert right now. That's just not something that you can reasonably do. So he's the guy you have to build your team around, and that's not a bad thing at all because he is more than capable of, like you said, leading a team to the Super Bowl. And I'm 100% with you. He's a guy that I'd be more than willing to put. I'd be more than willing to put my hopes in as a Chargers fan. And for the Chargers, front office from a team perspective, you've got yourself a good one and very tough guy as well. Doesn't get the credit for being a
Hmm.
tough quarterback. Really big arm. So I'm 100% in on Justin Herbert. And the last thing that I'll add here is that they extended Justin Herbert before the Bengals extended Joe Burrow. And they're both eligible, I believe, right now for that extension. So they got the extension done. And, when the Bengals pay Joe Burrow, they'll have to outbid what the Chargers did for Herbert. If they would have waited longer, the Bengals could have got off that Burrow extension sooner. So they even timed this well. So I have no complaints about this deal at all.
Yeah, I like it, and I'm actually interested and looking forward to see what the Chargers can do this year because what is that AFC West? I mean, obviously you have the Chiefs. I don't know about the Broncos and stuff, but I mean, we'll see how that works out because I feel like they underperformed a little bit last year. So we'll see what they can do this year. And if, like we're kind of saying with the Jalen Brown, not to the extent of maybe a Super Bowl, but if they make that AFC Championship already this next year, if they can win a few games in the playoffs, then the contract's already looking better. I would say not looking. Obviously, it's not fantastic because you do want that ring, but it'll already be like already put some doubts in knowing on his first year, like after the extension, he's already progressing, or the team, I should say, is already progressing at least in the playoffs.
Yeah, and kind of switching over to another guy who got himself a new contract is Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas, guard for the New York Giants, went out there any guard in, or excuse me, tackle. Biggest guarantee for any tackle in NFL history. I think this is a great move for the Giants because they ran the ball really well last year, and he was one of the main reasons for it. He was a great tackle last year, and the Giants are locking down their franchise left tackle. So I think this is a great move for the Giants.
I'd agree. I think I know he struggled in his rookie year, but I mean he's shown everything you've wanted him to since then. Really, being one of the best options at a left tackle, and then I think anytime if you're really trying to progress as a franchise and start making waves in the postseason, get the quarterback. What's the next thing besides the tackle position, particularly with like left tackle and then D end. So I don't mind overpaying any of those positions necessarily. If do people think this is maybe an overpay? Because I mean that's what you've seen is that's what kind of you need to get that next level. If you look at I would say most, not all, but most of the teams that make deep playoff runs and make the Super Bowl.
And even looking at the roster that the Giants have, it's like that's a team that they don't have an elite quarterback, so you have to make sure you can protect them. They're going to need to be able to run the ball to kind of get their offense going. So that to me is like if you are paying a quarterback, an insane number, then maybe that's an area where you can try and go a little bit cheaper or try and skim a couple dollars, get a guy on a 1 year deal that can help you win. But, if your identity is going to be a good offensive line, you absolutely have to have a good left tackle. So I think it's not only smart from like a team building perspective, like you said, like it's one of the most valuable positions. It's worth the overpay, but also like with the identity of that team, they're going to need to be able to go out there and run the football. And losing your offensive lineman is not the way to get that done. So you get them signed up, and you don't have to worry about next offseason. You don't have to play the game of him holding out. You don't have to play the game of him expecting, a long-term deal, and you want to give him the franchise tag. You get it cleaned up. You don't have to worry about it once his contract expires, and maybe he plays even better next year and would have got a bigger number next offseason.
Hmm. I agree too, because the other thing is, like you said, it fits the style of the team, and that he's a very important player on that offense. And if anything, I think it should only help Daniel Jones. But even 5 year contract, maybe down the line, depending on how the Giants shake out. I don't know specifically Daniel Jones' contract right now, but say maybe they can finally trade for a vet quarterback like you've seen with Matt Stafford a couple years ago, or if they do have to go the draft route. That just having that anchor on that left tackle position should like should theoretically help your quarterback in any situation, whether you get an older vet, whether you stick with Daniel Jones, or whether you go younger.
Yeah, the Daniel Jones, I believe it was, I want to say it was either 3 or 4 years. I wrote the Andrew Thomas this morning and put it in there, but I do not remember the number off the top of my head. But I believe there is a way for them to get out of that, even though it is a long-term deal. I think if they wanted, they could move off that deal. So yeah, like you said, this gives them the option to build with Daniel Jones, or even if they go for an older quarterback, like you brought up Stafford for an example, if they decide to go that route, either way, you're flexible, and keeping Andrew Thomas gives you that flexibility. So I think this is a great move for the Giants. Once again, another well-timed extension. So credit to them for that, because hey, the Giants haven't always been a well-run organization, but they have turned things around recently. Well, maybe not, because they did have the whole Saquon debacle, and
Uh,
I guess he is coming back on the 1 year deal, so not the worst thing for him either. So I guess they still have their flaws, but right now they're at the best spot they've been at for the last couple of years, so they deserve some credit for that.
I agree. And then one real quick thing, because that's an interesting point of, they had the kind of the issues with Saquon, but even though we've seen a little bit in the past, it sounds like it's going to be just a growing issue in the future. So I wouldn't expect maybe a lot of teams to handle that running back situation correctly or necessarily the right way going forward.
Yeah. And also with that point, they were on the first wave of it too. It's
Hmm.
like we've seen that a little bit in the past, but I think this particular offseason going into training camp, that was it's probably the most that the running back market has ever fluctuated, or the most that teams have, maybe undervalued in comparison to what the running backs want. So I think it has hit a new level this offseason. So it's not like, and they're not the only team. The Cowboys,
No.
Raiders have also had these problems as well. So that's a good point to bring up. Well, they didn't do that perfectly. They got the 1 year deal. He's going to be back, so I guess they do deserve some credit for that, and they can reevaluate next offseason.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, the last, I guess, contract extension is Cole Kmet, and I had the number pulled up. I want to say it was 4 years, 50 million, but I will double check on that. I'm almost, I think I'm right. But yes, 4 years, 50 million extension for Cole Kmet.
Okay.
Interesting deal, very interesting deal. He wasn't necessarily the type of tight end that I was expecting to get this much money. So, what are your thoughts on the Bears going out and big money on a guy like Cole Kmet?
I mean, I'd like to look at the other tight end positions, but I mean, I that's one where At tight end position too, I don't know. That's not like a marquee position necessarily to spend that type of money with as well. But for me, I don't think not that the talent isn't there, but I just think I could list a lot, more tight ends that I would rather have than him. So that's not a contract that I'm in love with necessarily. I think it's an over. I think it's too high.
Yeah, and the NFL contracts can be screwy to try and determine who gets paid the most
Hmm.
for a position. But just going off um, base salary, you have, or I guess we should go off contract average annual value. We'll go off that. That's probably the most accurate number. Average annual value. You got Waller at 17 million a year, Kittle at 15 million a year, Travis Kelsey at 14 million a year, Goddard at 14 million a year, and Mark Andrews at 14 million a year. So he's right around that range. And, I really think all those tight ends are far better than him.
Yeah.
So I do think, that this is a little bit of an overpay. The one defense that I will give the Bears is that um, 38.2 of it is guaranteed. And the way it was reported 20 million in new first year cash. Um, so what I think that means is that he's basically going to make a large chunk of that in his first year, and then he won't be as big of a cap hit 2, 3, 4 years down the line. Which is I do like that from a team building perspective. You get that out of
Hmm.
the way in a year where you're probably not going to be as competitive, and then next year, the year after, he's not as big of a cap hit. So I think the over contract is a little bit overpay, and I don't love Cole Kmet as a tight end, but it does kind of take some spice out of it when he's getting a big chunk of that taken out the first year.
Okay, that's fair. Because one of my other big concerns, besides just specific him, paying him that much as a tight end in the league, was I just think with the Bears team right now and their roster layout, I would just think that you could spend that money maybe better in other ways to fully fill out the rest of your roster and get better in other areas. But if it does, if it does work out like that, because I do agree they're not going to be. Um, I don't think, yeah, they're not going to be a good like playoff team. For surely, I mean, maybe you get in the playoffs, anything can happen, but I wouldn't see more than a wild card. Um, and further beyond that to be truly competitive. So, but if it does work out, then and as the deal goes on, they get more money to start really fixing that roster while you got Justin Fields there, and and making it happen, then starting to fully go forward as a franchise.
Yeah, and like you said, we just talked about it with Andrew Thomas. We just gave the Giants credit for extending their franchise left tackle, and if you look at a team like the Bears, they could certainly um, use investing that money in the offensive line and defensive line rather than the tight end position, especially when you went out in the offseason and made a big move for a pass catcher in, DJ Moore.
Hmm.
Uh, it is different because you're looking at tight end and a guy that Fields has played with versus wide receiver and guy he hasn't played with, but still looking at offensive weapons, Cole Kmet and DJ Moore are both falling in that category. So, they do have a lot of stock invested in the weapons around Fields, which, I don't ultimately think is a bad thing, but you still need the trenches to be figured out there as well.
Actually, yeah, that is very true because that's one thing is Fields hasn't really had any help or anyone to throw to necessarily. So it may be in a way too that's showing Fields that we understand where we've been at these past couple of years, what we're lacking. So it's like a little bit of respect of like, hey, we're gonna get you at least solidify. Well, there you got you, DJ Moore, but we're gonna gonna solidify and get you some more weapons. So you don't just kind of run around and not die every play,
Hmm.
and actually have someone to throw to.
And here's the last thing that I will add to this, kind of off topic a little bit, but I think and Trey mentioned this in the NFL Slack as well. But the Bears are just getting somehow the Bears are everyone's favorite pick to take a massive leap forward and win the NFC North and make the playoffs. And The NFL Top 100 came out, and Justin Fields was listed above Trevor Lawrence. And I just don't know where all of this Bears love is coming from out of this, just out of the blue. All of a sudden, everyone thinks the Bears are this year's sleeper team. And I just don't see it. I like Justin Fields. It's nothing against Justin Fields. I think he's a good quarterback, and the Bears did a good job, especially the position they drafted him in. I think he was 12th, or he was definitely outside of the top 10. They did a great job with that selection, but he's as good as Trevor Lawrence, and the Bears are not a good enough team yet to win 8, 9, 10 games like some people are saying. I just don't know how we suddenly got to this point where the Bears are getting all this love despite Fields being slightly unproven, and that roster being very unproven as a whole.
Yeah, and that's what I was going for because I saw that in the champ as well of like that 9-8 I think is what they had him. One of the people had him listed at, um, and I mean I like the team of the Bears. Like I like some of the players, but I agree that that's a huge jump. Um, and while I believe in Justin Fields, I don't know if necessarily DJ Moore and Cole Kmet are gonna allow him. Like those are the weapons that are gonna allow Justin Fields just to make that huge jump and stuff. Because if you look at it on the other side, I mean, sure, Jalen Hurts made a huge jump last year. Look at that roster though. Like
Mm-hmm.
look at and even his weapons were better too last year with Goddard, who we just mentioned, better than Komet, AJ Brown and Devon Smith better than DJ Moore. And then what they did have was the trenches too. On top of that, great offensive line, and they already had a solid D line, and then made a couple acquisitions too. So it does seem like a far jump. And not to get too off topic too. I've been is what's the problem with the Vikings? I've been seeing a lot of. Is there something I'm missing? As why does everyone? I've seen a couple people like list them third
Mm-hmm.
or second, like you said. I guess because the Lions too. Yeah, so they were listed third. Um, but I don't know. Did the roster have a lot of overturn? It's just weird to see them going automatically to third in that division too, because that's not. It's a competitive division, but it's not like a NFC West, AFC West division.
Yeah, so the logic on the Vikings is like last year they won a lot of close games, a lot of one-score games, got to I believe 13 wins, and then they had a big salary dumping offseason.
Okay.
Cook, Thielen, Michael Kendricks. I believe they've lost one or two guys off the D line. Uh, Patrick Peterson, I believe, also. So they lost a handful of guys off that team. So now you're looking at like Alexander Madison being your starting running back. You're now looking for Jordan Addison to come in as a rookie and be your wide receiver two in what should be a pass heavy offense. Considering you have Justin Jefferson, you should probably throw the ball quite a bit. So I get the hesitation on the Vikings, but I still think that they finish second or third. That division right now, I think it's very close between Lions, Packers, and Vikings as to who comes out 1, 2, 3. I'd put
Hmm.
the Bears at 4, but I think there are people who are high on the Bears that have the Vikings in that 4 slot. So I am kind of in that middle ground where I still think they have the talent to win quite a few games, and I don't think you know third in that division probably gets you from 7 to 9 wins, somewhere in that range, which I think is kind of understandable for a Vikings team that dumped
Hmm.
a lot of players this offseason. But I do think they finish above the Bears, which I don't think everybody does.
Yeah, I guess that is true because I mean, although I wasn't the biggest Adam Thielen fan over probably the past 2 years now, and I did really like Jordan Addison in college, and I think KJ Osborne's a good wide receiver three. I
Hmm.
would say I think Alexander Madison's probably been arguably the best backup running back in the league. Well, besides Tony Pollard, if you count that, they were more committee. But for some time now, or one of the better options. But I will say the because I remember we did the week three hot takes or for NFL I think last year is when it was sometime in the first 3 weeks. But I know a couple years ago the Vikings were. like one of the highest teams in the leagues for losing one score games. And I'd written something like, okay, maybe this new head coach comes in, and I think that out of the first 3 weeks they had won one or maybe two already one score games, or at least early in the season. And I had said something, just I'd written something like, well, maybe this is the change now. You get that new head coach, and you can win a lot more of these one score games. And then they did that. So
Mhm.
while I don't think that's not a way to, you don't want to survive on only winning one score games, I think they still I get the hesitancy to when you see a team win a lot of one score games, but I do think that is still very manageable for that team specifically.
Yeah, and that is a good point that I probably underlooked that as well. And I imagine other people underlook that as well. And on the same side, overlook or overestimate teams that lose a lot of one score games. You lose a lot of one score teams and games, and team. You think that team will be amazing the next year, and that's not always the case either. So it works on the other side of that coin as well. But to your point, there is something about being able to go out there and win a one-score game that is valuable. Even if you don't like Kirk Cousins as your franchise quarterback, or you think there are other guys who are better, still, it's like having a quarterback who has experience winning one-score games, close games. That is valuable. Having a head coach that can manage those pressure situations, can manage the clock, and put you in a position to win one-score games. Those are valuable things that, you know, sometimes that feels fluky. Sometimes that is actual skill of the players and the coaches to win those close games. So, that is a good point that, I kind of overlooked that until you said it. When you win one score games, if you're good in one score games, you're going to win a lot more games. So there's
Hmm.
always that as well.
And then the last thing, I think it's funny because actually the Lions were kind of like that too. And maybe, and I remember, because I always say they played them real tough, but they ended up losing. So I feel like that division will be super interesting because the Lions are a team like that too, with a lot of one score games, losses. Maybe people think they can win those games more now, heading into next season. But
Mhm.
that division should be, well, not a top tier division, I would say. It should be at least pretty interesting throughout the whole season of, very competitive.
Yeah, and there's a lot of storylines too. Like, how is Jordan Love going to play as the starting quarterback for the first time? And the Packers roster, it's never ideal to have a young quarterback starting for his first season as you're looking to make the playoffs. But that's a good roster that the Packers have. It's like it has some flaws. Very good defense, so it's like good running back should be able to run the ball. You'd think some questions at receiver, but a lot of promise there. So it's like even the Packers roster, even though they have a young quarterback, like what happens if Jordan Love is better than people think he's going to be when he gets that opportunity to be the clear number one guy? Talented roster around him. So there's reasons to like all those teams, and there's
Hmm.
also reasons to dislike all those teams. So it's interesting to see, like you said, that's going to be a very interesting division.
Yeah, I agree.
And the last kind of, I guess not the last kind of, the last talking point for the NFL offseason is Devon Witherspoon, who a lot of people really like this guy coming out of Illinois. And it's interesting to me that he is the only rookie to not sign his rookie contract, and he is holding out. He won't be at training camp because he has not signed that deal. Personally, this is something that I'd have to go back and do more research, in all honesty, to know who has done this in the past. But this is not something that I think is a great sign. And cornerback is probably the hardest position to play as a rookie, or at least one of them. Very, very hard. And maybe it'll be a little bit easier for him since there's some quality corners in that Seattle secondary. But this is a major red flag for me personally. For someone who is entering their rookie year, especially at the cornerback position, you'd like them to get as many reps as possible in the offseason.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. It's definitely something you wouldn't want to see from that franchise, from the fans too. Of seeing the person we drafted five, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we'll see. Also, I didn't. He wasn't even necessarily my top cornerback in the draft either. So I don't know. I'm sure I would assume the situation plays itself out, and maybe towards the end of the year, you don't even think about this anymore. But heading into a new season, depending on what your goals are, or Seattle's goals are for that season too, or where you predict them, it's just it's never a good sign. Yeah, it's never good
Mhm.
already with the contract disputes. Um, but then towards the end of the year, he could he could play. His play could speak for itself, then
Mhm.
people won't even think about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a very good point. Like, say you hold out for a week, 2 weeks, get the contract you want, and then go out there and have a rookie year like a Tariq Woolen, like a Sauce Gardner. Maybe not even to that level, maybe even a slightly lesser level. All of a sudden, like I'm not predicting that that's what's going to happen, but that's a good way to get some of those concerns, completely off the books. So if he plays well, this will end up being a non-issue. Um, but I do think it is interesting that out of 200 and some players, he was the one guy. And I'm also interested to know one thing that we'll never know is how much money this is kind of being debated over. Is
Hmm.
this a large sum? Or are we doing this over a couple 100,000? 1 million, 2 million? What's the number that we're off here? Because personally, I don't think the rookie deal is the deal that you need to squeeze all your money out of.
Yeah.
The second and third deal, more so the second deal, is the one that you need to just to squeeze the most money out of, the one that pays you while you're, age 24, 25 through age 30, 31. That's when you need to make sure you're getting paid. Your rookie season, you know, is not the time to absolutely worry about pay. That's when you need to come in and prove yourself as an NFL player. And maybe he does, and that's fine. But, it is kind of, we'll never know for certain. This could, end up like I said, end up being a non-issue. But I do think there are red flags.
I agree. It's just something you don't necessarily want to see uh, heading into the season, trying to get focused and trying to achieve your goals. And there's already an issues. There's already issues, kind of preseason and stuff. So
Yep. And then our last topic for today, swinging over to the UFC side of things and closing out with some fight talk. Now, uh, the thing that I kind of want to talk about today is the BMF belt in itself. Obviously, UFC 291, we have Justin Gaethje, Justin Poirier fighting for the BMF belt. And that fight itself, one thing we can break down that fight all day, but I kind of want to talk about the belt in itself and your opinion of the belt, and we'll go from there and kind of talk about some scenarios, some fighters that we view as BMFs. But I guess to start, what's your opinion of the BMF belt in itself?
okay, so I think I'll start it with I wouldn't not necessarily wouldn't have been mad, but it's unnecessary in a little bit, as in there could have never been a BMF belt, and my life would be perfectly fine as like a UFC fight fan.
Mhm.
Um, the reason they did it though was because the Covington Usman fell out the first time, right? It was supposed to be that MSG. I want to say it was November, and then Colby and Usman ended up fighting in December on the last pay per view. I'm pretty sure. So they created the belt because for the UFC always goes like to sell, which I guess kind of to be fair, but to sell a pay per view, there needs to be a belt or something attached to it. Hence why
Mhm.
they make a lot of interim title fights too. Um, so I didn't mind it when they first created it, and I just think to me, they got the two great people to literally like do a BMF fight on, because you have Masvidal in Florida, uh, backyard street fighting and everything. Like I don't think anyone would question that, seeing him on the streets, or how he was raised, or how he moves in general. And then Nate Diaz and Stockton coming up from there, and the way he carries himself, and how he does it. I thought it worked out well, and both the way they both talk, like you can tell. Like I think there is a bit of truth to it. So I think I would hate to see in the future if we just start handing out BMF, because to me, I guess, but maybe that's even wrong. I'd like to see your perspective. To me, a BMF isn't just they're super good fighters and they're scary inside the octagon, because that's what the normal belt's for. That's how you become champion and stuff. The BMF to me is the intangibles of outside. So that's why I don't think everyone's a gangster or the baddest mother effer.
Mhm.
Um, So I don't know. It's a belt that I could see. I would not like to see going forward. Just hand it out anytime they can't book a they book or a pay per view headliner and they're just like, oh, we'll give them the BMF belt. So I think, and then I know some other fighters I thought it was a bit gimmicky, and then some other fighters liked it because it was Masvidal versus Diaz, and it works well. But overall, I'm kind of indifferent. I don't mind it. I think it gives a little bit more, not flair than obviously a title fight, but it gives a little different, kind of like you said, some spice to it. Um, of like it's a different type of back and forth, I think, or press conference and stuff. But I mean, overall, if that's what they feel like they need to draw more fans in or get more people to watch this upcoming pay per view, then so be it. It's not like I'm gonna like be mad at it.
Hmm. I hold a lot of the same opinions you do, and I really like the way that they're doing it the second time around. The first time around, I think is the perfect way to roll that with Diaz and with Masvidal. They got the two guys who, if you were to ask who are the UFC's two biggest BMFs, if your answer isn't Nick and Nate Diaz, it's one of the Diaz brothers and
Hmm.
Jorge Masvidal. So I think they hit a home run with the first one. And I, I don't even at this point I don't even look at it as like a like a like an actual title belt. To
Hmm.
me, it's much better used as like a reason to book fun fights as a pay-per-view main event and to give it two extra rounds because we see a lot of these fights, and they were doing it for a second with the 5 round co-main events that were non-title fights. But this is a really good reason to make Justin Gaethje and Justin Poirier a 5 round fight and have it headline a pay-per-view. And the other nice thing, in my opinion, is that it didn't really come off as desperate because we've already had the July pay per view and we already have the August pay per view. Both of those pay per views are lined up. The UFC could have had a normal fight night, but they this wasn't necessarily a desperation move. But hey, let's get this fun fight. Let's get it on pay per view. Obviously, selling an extra pay per view card, squeezing an extra one in, you can debate. Kind of the morals of trying to squeeze another $75 out of your
Yeah.
fans. That's a whole nother discussion. I'm against the pay per view model in total.
Hmm.
So I don't love that aspect of it, but I do like the aspect of putting together a fun fight card just because we've got a fun fight that we can put as a main event. So that's kind of my the thing that I like about it. I think it is better, like you said, for rare occasions. We can't just be handing it out to anybody. And the other thing that I'll add is that I kind of think that this fight, the thing that I like about it is I think it represents a different type of BMF. You talked a lot about the off the or outside of competition aspect of
Hmm.
things, which I agree with. But I think this one is a good display of the BMF mindset in the octagon. It's like Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier will throw down. They will go to war, and that's like a whole different category of BMF, in my opinion. Two guys who aren't afraid of anyone, will fight anyone, and it's like that, like in fight war, in octagon war, is something that I think holds a lot of value in the BMF as well. And I think this fight's a good representation of that just because of who both those guys are.
Yeah, two things. One, yeah, definitely agree with that. As in, that's why when I did see like the two they did pick to bring out the BMF belt back, I was 100% fine with it because I mean, yeah, I think you could see about their last. I don't know, specifically how far I could go back, but I'm sure it would still ring true. If we even say the last three fights from each of these guys, it's arguably been like the best fight on the card or one of the best fights on those cards that they've been on. Both their Chandler fights,
Mhm.
and so they definitely deserve it. Like, and then yeah, the warrior mentality. It should be such a fun fight, like you were saying.
Yeah.
So if this is what we have to do to get that, I am not mad at it because I want to say that Chandler Poirier might have been a co-main, but that Chandler Gaethje was the first fight on that card, and I mean that could have easily been the co-main based off those two names and the way those two people throw down. So yeah, this should be fun, and I do think like you were saying, I can 100% understand they represent that BMF mentality inside the octagon. But the other thing too is that why I'm also not really mad at it was because it could have been. I could have definitely seen the UFC building a fight night card, like a bad card, and then throwing this belt on the top of it and saying, "Well, here's now a new pay per view." The good thing is, it's a pretty fun card. It looked
Hmm.
stacked, give or take. It's in Salt Lake, but it's a pretty fun card, top to bottom. And then instead of just having a 5 rounder, which most fight fans would still watch or would watch, obviously between Gaethje and Poirier. Now that you throw the belt on it, it makes it feel a little bit more interesting. Not necessarily it doesn't have to be it's worth more, but it is feel like it is more interesting now. And since you built a great card and stacked that on top of it, I think it is a little bit like a cherry on top in a sense.
Yep, I'm 100% with you. And they kind of, in to your point about the other two Chandler fights for both of them. I know the Chandler and Gaethje fight was the first fight on the card, and that was because Trevor Whitman, Gaethje's coach, was coaching Rosen Namajunas and Kamaru Usman in the
Okay, yeah.
co-main and main, and he wanted a break, but that ended up being one of the best things of like that ended up being one of the funnest like fight cards because it's like, all right, first fight of the main card, we've got Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler, and it was an absolute war, and that ended up kind of making that card even better because you had like that card kind of kicks off a great main card. Um, and then yeah, the I was rewatching the Dustin Poirier and Chandler fight, and in the fight, Joe Rogan says, "I completely forgot this was the co-main event. We still got the middleweight title fight after this."
Uh-huh.
So that kind of goes to show in itself how good that fight is, how good that fight was when that's the response you get from the commentator is, "Hey, we still got a world title fight after this. This isn't
Uh-huh.
even the main event." So that if anything shows that this is main event worthy, that's it right there. That they can both go do that and steal the show with title fights on the card. Um, and the other thing that I kind of want to talk about is who would you want to see fight for the BMF belt in the future if they were to do it again? Obviously, this may be the last time, but we'll just say, assuming it's done again, maybe it's someone that the winner could fight, or maybe it's just a guy or two guys or even five guys. Who are some guys in the UFC that you think fall into that BMF category that would make sense for a BMF fight eventually?
Uh-huh. I mean, do you have names on top of your head? I wanted to look through the rankings. I
Mhm.
have a name I could give out, but I'd want to see if I could pick some actual two for sure matchups that I could do.
Yeah, I have one guy off the top of my head, so I'll
Okay,
start with
those.
that. The one guy that absolutely jumps out to me is Max Holloway.
Hmm.
Max Holloway, and he also said I watched. He did a breakdown of the card, talking about who he thought was going to win each fight, and I watched that, and he said, "Hey, I'd love to fight the winner of this fight. Maybe not right now, but eventually, I'd love to throw my hat in the ring to fight for the BMF belt, fight for the winner, fight against the winner." And that's one that Max Holloway against either of these two guys, tremendous fight. To me, that would be a great like say Poirier or Gaethje, the winner fights for the title. Say they lose, maybe they win, but say they lose, then that'd make a lot of sense. Max Holloway versus one of those two, 155. We've seen the Poirier fight twice. Once when they were kind of both very new in the UFC, both featherweights at that time. Then we saw Max Holloway go up a guy that represents, the BMF to a great extent, whether it be like his beat down at Cater and talking
Hmm.
to the commentators, whether it be him showing Ortega how to block or him pointing down. And who was that fight against?
Oh, I'm trying to think. I
It
think
was,
there was an R. I don't know if it was a last name, but
oh my
I
god, I
know
forget.
exactly who you're talking about, though.
Yeah.
He was game
Regardless,
too, actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see there. That's gonna pop in my head 20 minutes after we get done. I'm gonna be like, oh god damn it. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, he's up 3 rounds to 0. 10 seconds left. He points to the ground, and the two throw down for the last 10 seconds. Max Holloway, as game as it gets, he stepped in to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov on a week's notice. That's
Uh-huh.
one of the people talk about willing to fight anyone, anytime, anywhere. That is the biggest one of all time. Being from Hawaii and being like, yeah, I'll fly to New York to fight Khabib this week. That's absolutely insane. So Max Holloway would be my number one for guy that hasn't fought that I'd like to see fight for that.
Was it? I just looked it up. Like Ricardo Lamas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
Lamas.
Um. So I guess I was like, that's what I'm saying too. But I guess that's the kind of the drawback of it too, because I I found well, I had the first dude in my head that I know, and I found out. So I have two matchups, but I guess maybe that is while Nate Diaz and Masvidal were for me perfect as the literal
Mhm.
BMFs. Like no one wants to see those people in a street fight or catch them outside. But um, give or take, no one else was also saying Masvidal or Diaz is top dog, skill wise or
Yeah,
championship necessarily. So maybe there is that bit of a drawback. So the first guy that popped in my head, but I guess these BMF matchups will be more like you said. I thought Holloway was perfect because it's kind of almost gets both of them because he is such a warrior and he's such a dog in the cage. But the first dude that popped in my head was Shavkat, especially because that BMF the finishing of he finishes
hmm
almost every fight, if not I think about every fight so far, maybe his last one. But and then I know a lot of people are big Chimaev fans, so if we could ever get that shot caught, yeah, Chimaev, I think that would have BMF written all over it. um and then the other one, shoot, I just had it. Oh, and then this one too. Because I thinking of this fight, it's funny, honestly, that Adesanya Pereira was arguably a BMF fight. Like they could have made that the same way. So I was gonna say now that Pereira's in light heavyweight, him when Jiri gets healthy, I think could also be another BMF fight. So
yeah. I like both of those calls. Not exactly what I was expecting because I think when most people think BMF, they think 145, 155. And when they think 170, I don't think they think Shavkat Rakhmonov. But like you said, that man, his fight with Jeff Neal, like, all
mhm.
right, that puts you in BMF territory. Like that's how you get yourself in that direction. So that's one that underrated shout. But Hamzat Chimaev also set the record for like the shortest turnaround to get two wins in a row in the
Mhm.
UFC. Anyone, anytime, anywhere. That's the definition of that. So I think both those guys are good shouts as well. And I had Yuri in my mind as well, but I had a different opponent in mind. I was thinking Jamal Hill. Him and
Okay.
Jamal Hill. I think that is. I tweeted that a couple, maybe a week, 2 weeks ago. I think that, in my opinion, will probably end up being a title fight sometime,
Hmm.
somehow, hopefully. But if they can't book that for a title, I would not mind at all seeing that be the BMF because I think that's probably the most fun fight you can make in like the upper weight classes, especially at light heavyweight. Heavyweight, probably even if you look at those weight classes, I think above 170, maybe even including 170. That's probably one of the funnest fights you can make in terms of pure violence. So I'd throw that in there as well.
Yeah, I think that would be. I think he's a good fit. Those two are a good fit as well. Um, Shoot, I was gonna say, I was gonna say, I'm sure in true UFC fashion, they'll probably bring it up just for two heavyweights because they're the big scary dudes, and it'll just be people that can knock each other out. But I was trying to look for some smaller guys. I have two now. Oh shoot, I just forgot his name. Oh, Figueiredo. Is
Ooh.
he fighting in Bantam now? Right, he's moving up. Um, Out of flyweight.
Yeah, he's got a fight booked too.
Okay, what is it? I
Yeah,
didn't know
he's got a
that.
bantamweight fight booked. He's got
Against.
Dominic Cruz lined up.
Oh God, I didn't even know Dominic Cruz was fighting. I
Yeah,
mean, I like Cruz a lot. He's a little old. That's a scary fight because I just don't know with the chin. I don't know if Figgy's the person you want across from you. But I
and
can see a scenario where he's a little unhittable, maybe. But
maybe in Cruz's in the last time Figueiredo fought a fighter of that generation, it was Joseph Benavidez, and he almost legally murdered him.
killed him
Literally, he almost
twice.
killed him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like the first time was bad.
Was
This
the headbutt right? Was the
Yeah,
first one?
the headbutt was the first one, and they ran it back way too soon. And he had him in the rear naked choke. Might be the nastiest rear naked choke in UFC history.
Yeah, I think it wasn't that one was a fight night card, but they threw the belt on it. I think
Hmm
on
Yeah,
the and I remember like that was one of the worst. facial reactions specifically to a rear naked
Oh,
choke, as in like it seemed like the eyes were rolling back, and he
he
was
didn't
yeah.
tap.
I thought he in it. I think the ref stopped it a little late too. He was
Oh,
holding on to that for, but
also,
I
also
oh,
when
okay.
when he wakes up, like if you watch long enough and you listen closely, you can hear him yell. You can hear him
Uh-huh.
yell as he wakes up, which is one of the craziest things you can see in a
Oh,
fight. Is when he wakes up from being unconscious, and the first thing he
hmm.
does is scream. Very, very
I have to check it out again.
yeah,
The one, my last one, because I was thinking figuring out bantamweight, and I don't know. I feel like for me, I think he might not be the most terrifying necessarily, but I think he is a BMF is Sandhagen. I'm a huge Sandhagen
yeah.
fan, and I feel like that fits kind of the anywhere, anytime. Like he was already trying to fight Umar,
Mhm.
um, and even though people were hating on it because he's so much lower in the rankings, but one of those fights I think would just be maybe one more name to throw in there.
Yeah, he took on Yan on short notice too. He took
Hmm.
that for a title interim title on short notice as well, and that was an all time great fight too, all time great throwdown. Um, three guys that I will throw out. Not I don't necessarily need to go on as deep on. I will throw Yan in there as well in the
I was
lower weight
thinking
class.
about it. Hmm.
I think him and Sandhagen are very close for me in terms of BMF status. So I'll throw those two in there for BMF. And then Volkanovski at 145. I think he deserves some credit for being able to fight anyone. But, he does have that belt, and it'd be a little
Exactly.
that doesn't need to happen.
Uh-huh.
Another guy doesn't need to happen, but Usman too.
Hmm.
Um, took the Burns fight, or switched from Burns to Masvidal on short notice. Had the first fight against Covington was an absolute war. Second fight also a war, a little bit of a lesser extent. So
Hmm.
I'll throw Usman in there as well for getting in those wars and being able to fight anyone but Volkanovski and Usman. Once you get the real belt and hold it for as long as they did, Volkanovski obviously still has it. You have a little less reason for them to fight for the BMF, I think.
Yeah.
And to close it out here, anyone who is interested in UFC two, geez, why am I blanking on the card number 291?
Yeah.
Um, 291. Anyone who's interested, will have some content up later this week as well. We're gonna have the preview out. We'll have best bets out. I'm doing the Dustin Poirier film study. Hope to get that out either tomorrow, Friday. So that will be out as well. So for anyone that's real interested in UFC 291, there will be plenty of content on the site Vendetta Source Media and on the YouTube as well. So, Anthony, do you have anything that you want to throw in here before we close the show down?
No, I'm just I'm kind of I'm excited for that. I'll get to be back home finally and get to watch it with some friends. So I'm excited for that UFC 291. And I will say, like a broken record, hopefully the altitude is not too much of a problem.
I'm 100% with you. 100% with you. Hope the altitude keeps the card fun. I am
Uh-huh.
concerned though. Also, I don't know about you, and I don't know what time the Crawford Spence fight is supposed to happen.
Yeah.
But I think I may have double TVs in the living room this weekend personally, with Crawford Spence on the smaller TV. I will say that Crawford and
Yeah.
Spence, if it's on at the same time, will be on the smaller TV. But I might have to double TV it this weekend because that's also a very good fight.
I agree. It's a good weekend for some fight fans.
Yep. Yep. And thank you to everyone who tuned in to Vendetta Sports Media Daily Show. And we'll be back tomorrow. We'll have two more people sitting in the Daily Show host role and talking some sports. So make sure to return tomorrow. And thank you for tuning in today.